Here is the complete script followed by the JSON block. Hook. Every year, search engines fill up with the same answers when people look for the cheapest countries to relocate to. Portugal, Thailand, Mexico. And sure, those are legitimate options. But here is the thing, that conversation has become so well-worn that the actual bargains within those countries, and the genuinely overlooked alternatives sitting just beside them, rarely get the full treatment they deserve. The real question in 2026 is not just which countries are cheap, it is which specific places within the cheap countries give you the best combination of cost, climate, lifestyle, and a legal path to stay. We have put together a list of 12 destinations that answer that question. The list spans 4 continents. It includes European capitals, Adriatic coastlines, Southeast Asian bargains, highland colonial cities, and a handful of Italian regions that are quietly offering some of the most generous tax arrangements on the planet for foreign retirees. Some of these will be familiar names. Others are genuinely flying under the radar. And as you work toward number 1, you will find that our top pick offers something the others simply cannot match in terms of community, accessibility, and lifestyle per dollar. Keep in mind, the figures presented here are approximations meant to give you a sense of the cost of living. Always verify with up-to-date sources before making any decisions. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Number 12, Sicily, Italy. Sicily is the largest island in the Mediterranean and sits at the southern tip of Italy, separated from the mainland by the narrow Strait of Messina. Cities like Catania, Palermo, and the smaller Baroque town of Modica give you drastically different flavors of Sicilian life, from buzzing urban centers to quietly elegant hilltop streets. The climate is genuinely warm, with mild winters and long, dry summers, and the food culture here is among the most distinct in all of Europe. For those considering Sicily as a long-term base, the cost picture is noticeably better than northern Italy. An all-in monthly budget runs around $1,400 on average, and a one-bedroom apartment in the center of Catania or Palermo rents for roughly $650 a month. Entry-level property starts at about $50,000 in smaller comuni and can reach $160,000 for something more polished in a larger city. The residency route is the elective residency visa, which requires demonstrable passive income rather than active employment. What makes Sicily particularly interesting is the 7% flat tax on foreign pension income, available to those who relocate to qualifying towns under specific population thresholds. Furthermore, the so-called €1 home schemes are still active in a handful of Sicilian comuni for those willing to take on a renovation project. On the downside, infrastructure in Sicily can be genuinely unreliable. Trains between towns run on Italian time, public services vary enormously by municipality, and while the organized crime association that follows the island's reputation is more perception than practical reality for most foreigners, it is worth researching specific areas before committing. Number 11, Kotor and Budva, Montenegro. Montenegro is a small Balkan nation on the Adriatic coast with a landscape that stops people mid-sentence. The Bay of Kotor, in particular, resembles a Nordic fjord transported to southern Europe, with medieval walled towns tucked against steep limestone mountains. Budva, just down the coast, offers a more developed resort atmosphere with a well-preserved old town. Monthly living costs here come in around $1,100 to $1,400 all in for a comfortable lifestyle, and a one-bedroom in the center of Kotor or Budva runs between $500 and $900. Property entry points start at approximately $120,000, rising to $250,000 for something well located. Despite not being an EU member, Montenegro uses the euro, which provides currency stability and simplifies budgeting for European retirees. Residency is available through temporary residence tied to property ownership or company formation, renewable annually. Moreover, Montenegro is an EU candidate country and is widely expected to achieve membership around 2028, which means those establishing roots now are potentially locking in a position inside what will eventually be the European Union. Savvy property buyers have already started paying attention to that timeline. The catch is twofold. Healthcare infrastructure is limited compared to what most Western retirees are accustomed to, and during summer, the tourism crush in Kotor and Budva pushes prices up steeply. Restaurants, accommodation, and even groceries in tourist-facing areas can spike considerably between June and August. Number 10. Cuenca, Ecuador. Cuenca sits at 2,500 meters above sea level in the Andes, and it has been quietly drawing North American retirees for over 2 decades. The city has a UNESCO-listed colonial center, genuinely clean streets by regional standards, and a consistent spring-like climate that sits between 14 and 22 degrees Celsius year-round. Healthcare costs here are a fraction of what retirees pay in the United States, and quality is noticeably higher than the regional average. Monthly costs in Cuenca run roughly $1,100 to $1,500 all in for a comfortable setup. One-bedroom rentals in the center average around $550. Property starts at approximately $80,000 for entry-level and can reach $180,000 for something in a prime colonial-era building. Ecuador uses the US dollar, which eliminates currency exchange risk entirely for American retirees. Residency is accessible via the pensioner visa, which requires proof of a pension of $1,425 per month, equivalent to 3 times Ecuador's minimum wage. That threshold is very reachable for anyone drawing a modest US Social Security benefit plus a small private pension. However, the altitude adjustment is real. Some new arrivals experience fatigue, shortness of breath, and disrupted sleep for several weeks. Beyond that, Ecuador's national security situation has worsened noticeably since 2023, with organized crime activity increasing in some urban areas. Cuenca remains considerably calmer than Guayaquil or Kotor, but the trend is worth monitoring. Number 9. Sofia, Bulgaria. Sofia is the Bulgarian capital and, by a reasonable margin, one of the cheapest capital cities in the European Union. It joined the Schengen zone in March 2024, which meaningfully expanded its practical appeal for those who want to move freely across Europe without border checks. The city has a growing tech sector, fast broadband, and a surprisingly good restaurant scene at prices that would make Western Europeans wince with envy. All-in monthly costs in Sofia typically land between $900 and $1,300. A one-bedroom in the center rents for around $600. Entry-level property starts at $70,000 and goes to approximately $150,000 for something well-located. The income tax rate is 10%, the lowest flat rate in the entire EU, which matters if any income is sourced locally or if you are structured as a self-employed resident. Residency for non-EU nationals is achieved through a long-stay D visa, with pension income of roughly €1,800 per month required as a baseline, followed by a 1-year residence permit. The process is administrative rather than effortless, but it is well-trodden. On the downside, the Cyrillic alphabet creates a genuine day-to-day friction that residents in Western European destinations simply do not face. Navigating signage, bureaucracy, and basic correspondence takes adjustment. Additionally, Sofia's winters are real. Temperatures regularly drop to -5 Celsius or lower, and those expecting year-round mild weather will be disappointed. Number 8. San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. San Miguel de Allende sits at roughly 1,900 meters in the central Mexican highlands, giving it one of the more envied climates on the continent, averaging between 18 and 25 degrees Celsius through most of the year. The city is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, built around a colonial centro with cobblestone streets and pastel-colored facades, and it has the deepest concentration of English-speaking expats of any Mexican city. Monthly costs here run between $1,600 and $2,200 for a comfortable lifestyle, noticeably higher than others on this list. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center averages around $1,100 to $1,500, and entry-level property starts at $200,000 to $450,000. Residency follows Mexico's temporary or permanent resident pathway, which is income-based and relatively straightforward for retirees meeting the financial threshold. The expat infrastructure is genuinely impressive. English is spoken widely, there is a large arts community, good private medical care, and direct road access to major Mexican airports. For those making a first move abroad who want maximum comfort alongside lower costs, San Miguel absorbs the transition well. That said, years of expat demand have gentrified prices considerably. What once cost half of comparable US options now costs closer to two-thirds in many categories. The altitude also takes some adjustment, and those expecting a budget-first destination may find San Miguel sits more comfortably in the mid-range tier. Number 7. Bali, Indonesia. Bali operates as something between a lifestyle and a destination. The island's three main expat hubs, Ubud in the center, Canggu on the southwestern coast, and the quieter beach town of Sana, each offer a distinct version of the same fundamental bargain: warm weather, cheap food, wellness culture, and a pace of life that most Westerners find immediately decompressing. Monthly costs across Bali range from around $900 in a simpler setup to $1,700 for a more polished lifestyle with regular dining out and activities. Rent for a one-bedroom runs $500 to $1,200 depending on location and specification. Entry-level property starts at $80,000, though the legal structure requires attention. Foreigners cannot own land freehold in Indonesia and are limited to leasehold arrangements typically running 25 to 30 years. Residency options improved in recent years. The second home visa offers a 10-year stay for those who can deposit the equivalent of around $130,000 with an Indonesian bank. For those over 55, the retirement Kitas requires a pension of $1,500 per month and provides a more conventional retirement visa pathway. The traffic in South Bali, particularly around Canggu and Seminyak, is genuinely severe during peak periods. Additionally, Mount Agung, the island's active volcano, periodically disrupts flight schedules, something worth factoring in if regular international travel is part of the plan. Number 6. Plovdiv, Bulgaria. Plovdiv is Bulgaria's second city, sitting in the Thracian plain in the country's south, and it is considerably more relaxed than Sofia while costing noticeably less. The old town is a genuinely beautiful cluster of National Revival period houses built across three hilltops, and the city's designation as a European Capital of Culture in 2019 gave its arts and cafe scene a permanent upgrade. Monthly costs in Plovdiv run between $700 and $1,100 all in, making it one of the cheapest EU-adjacent options on this entire list. A one-bedroom in the center rents for roughly $475 a month. Property starts at around $50,000 for entry-level and reaches $110,000 for something well-situated. The residency pathway mirrors Sofia's long-stay D visa route, with Bulgaria having been a Schengen member since March 2024. For those who find Sofia a little too urban, Plovdiv gives you the same legal and tax framework at around 25% lower cost of living, with a more human scale and a river running through the city center. Furthermore, the cafe culture here is genuinely good, and the local food and wine scene punches well above the price point. The main practical drawback is the airport. Plovdiv has an international airport, but connections are limited and most intercontinental travelers will route through Sofia, roughly 90 minutes by road. English is also less widely spoken outside the central tourist areas, which creates additional friction compared to destinations with larger expat bases. Number 5. Alicante and the Costa Blanca, Spain. The Costa Blanca stretches along Spain's southeastern Mediterranean coast, and Alicante anchors it as the region's main city. With over 320 sunny days per year, a working port, a castle that overlooks the entire coastline, and a genuinely Spanish urban core sitting alongside affordable beach communities, this stretch of Spain has been a retirement staple for Northern Europeans for decades. Monthly costs here typically land between $1,400 and $1,900, representing solid value for a Mediterranean coastal lifestyle in a Western European country with full EU infrastructure, healthcare, and legal protections. A one-bedroom in the Alicante center rents for around $900, and entry-level property on the Costa Blanca starts at approximately $110,000 to $220,000. Residency for non-EU nationals is via the non-lucrative visa, which requires proof of sufficient passive income to support oneself without working in Spain. The British expat community here is the largest of any comparable region in Spain, which makes the practical transition straightforward for UK and Irish retirees. Healthcare through the Spanish public system is accessible to legal residents. Additionally, the cost of eating out, local wine, and fresh produce remains noticeably lower than in Madrid or Barcelona. The flip side is that some coastal towns, particularly between Benidorm and Torrevieja, have become so heavily tourist-dominated that they can feel less like Spain and more like an extension of the English seaside. Summer temperatures also regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, which some find oppressive for extended periods. Number 4. Puglia, Italy. Puglia occupies the heel of Italy's boot, with coastline on both the Adriatic and Ionian seas, and towns like Lecce and Ostuni that operate as two of the most architecturally distinctive places in southern Europe. Lecce, often called the Florence of the South for its Baroque stone carvings, sits well inland and offers a genuine city life at relatively modest prices. Ostuni, the white city on the hill, overlooks olive groves that run to the sea. Monthly costs across Puglia run between $1,400 and $1,900. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center averages around $800. Entry-level property starts at $80,000 and reaches $200,000 for something more substantial, though Trulli, the traditional conical stone houses of the Itria Valley, are still available for under €100,000 in some villages. Residency follows the elective residency visa pathway, which requires demonstrable passive income of around €31,000 per year. The headline financial incentive is the same 7% flat tax on foreign pension income available across qualifying Italian regions, applicable to towns under 20,000 residents. For a retiree drawing pension income from abroad, that flat rate is considerably more generous than what most Western tax authorities charge on equivalent income. On the downside, train and hospital infrastructure in rural Puglia is considerably thinner than northern Italy. Summer crowds in the Salento beach towns, particularly along the coast south of Lecce, can make quiet living difficult between July and August. Number 3. Da Nang and Hoi An, Vietnam. Vietnam's central coast sits between the two extremes of Ho Chi Minh City's intensity and Hanoi's density, and Da Nang has emerged as the country's most livable city for expats drawn by value and quality in roughly equal measure. Hoi An, 30 kilometers to the south, is a UNESCO-listed ancient trading town with lantern-lit streets, a river running through its old quarter, and one of the most walkable town centers in Asia. Monthly costs here are remarkably low. A comfortable lifestyle runs $700 to $1,200 all in. A one-bedroom in the center rents for around $550. Entry-level property starts at $80,000, though the ownership structure carries a significant caveat. Foreigners cannot own land in Vietnam at all, and property is held on 50-year leasehold terms, with policy on extension subject to ongoing government interpretation. The infrastructure along this coast has improved considerably in recent years. Da Nang International Airport has direct flights to multiple Asian hubs. Healthcare quality at private hospitals in Da Nang is good for the price point. The food, both street level and restaurant, is among the best value of any destination on this list. The single largest drawback for long-term residents is the absence of a formal retirement visa. There is no retirement visa pathway in Vietnam. Long-stay residents must currently manage through tourist visas, business visas, or investor structures, all of which require recurring paperwork, border runs, or both. For those comfortable with that level of administrative creativity, the value here is exceptional. For those seeking stability and simplicity, it is a genuine limitation. Number 2. Abruzzo, Italy. Abruzzo is Italy's best-kept secret for affordable long-term living, and that statement holds up under real scrutiny. The region occupies the central Apennines east of Rome, bordering the Adriatic coast, and it is the only place in Europe where you can ski in the morning and swim in the sea in the afternoon without exaggeration. 3 national parks cover roughly 1/3 of the region's total area. Towns like Pescara, Lanciano, and hundreds of hilltop villages sit within that landscape at prices that northern Italy charges for a parking space. Monthly costs in Abruzzo run between $1,100 and $1,700 all in. Rent averages around $625 for a one-bedroom. Property is where the numbers become genuinely striking. Entry-level property starts at $40,000, and houses in hilltop villages have sold for under €50,000, sometimes considerably under, particularly in inland comuni actively trying to attract new residents. Residency is through the elective residency visa. The 7% flat tax on foreign pension income applies here as it does in Sicily and Puglia, covering qualifying towns under the relevant population thresholds. For a retiree drawing a foreign pension, the combination of low property prices, low living costs, and a 7% tax cap creates a financial case that is difficult to match anywhere in Western Europe. The honest caveats are two. Abruzzo sits in a seismically active zone. An earthquake risk here is not theoretical. There is documented seismic history in the region, and that should factor into both property purchase decisions and insurance costs. Additionally, the region is rural in a real sense. International connectivity requires going through Rome or Pescara, and daily life outside the larger towns involves a car and some Italian. Number 1. Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Puerto Vallarta sits on Mexico's Pacific coast in the state of Jalisco, inside a deep crescent bay backed by the Sierra Madre Mountains. It has been a destination for American and Canadian retirees since the 1960s, but unlike some of its Mexican rivals, it has managed to maintain a balance between international infrastructure and local Mexican character. The Old Town, the Zona Romantica, and the Malecon Boardwalk give the city a walkable core that most Pacific Coast destinations lack entirely. Monthly costs here range from about $1,500 to $2,000 all in for a comfortable lifestyle. Rent for a one-bedroom in the center runs $800 to $1,400 depending on location and proximity to the beach. Entry-level property starts at $200,000 and reaches $400,000 for something well-situated. Residency follows Mexico's temporary or permanent resident pathway, which is income-based and widely understood by local immigration attorneys. What distinguishes Puerto Vallarta from everything else on this list is the combination of factors working together simultaneously. The LGBTQ+ community here is one of the most established in Latin America, and the broader retiree community is large, active, and well-organized. Direct flights to Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, Denver, and Vancouver mean that returning home for a medical appointment or a grandchild's birthday does not require a full-day odyssey. The Pacific beach access is real, not a marketing line. The jungle backdrop is real. The food, mixing Jalisco cuisine with decades of expat influence, is genuinely good. On the downside, high season between November and April drives prices noticeably upward across accommodation, restaurants, and services. Tourist zone pricing has also crept inland from the hotel strip in recent years, meaning that bargain hunters need to live slightly further from the center to access true local pricing. But measured against what a comparable lifestyle costs in California, Florida, or British Columbia, the value here remains substantial. And that rounds out the list. OUTRO. And there you have it, 12 of the cheapest countries and destinations to move and live in 2026. From Plovdiv's $700 a month EU lifestyle to Abruzzo's hilltop village bargains to Puerto Vallarta's Pacific Coast community, the common thread is that serious value still exists for those who know exactly where to look. If you found this useful, consider subscribing. We cover destinations like this every week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.